finish.
Let me finish.
Okay. You keep interrupting me, and so I can't make my point, and then you're just confusing everybody. And I want to answer the question because you asked the question. If you don't let me answer the question, people on the stream won't understand why I said what I said. If Microsoft converts to the Bitcoin standard and they start sweeping their cash flows, their dividends, and eliminate their buybacks, over 10 years, you end up with a situation where the company generates $4 to $5 trillion of Bitcoin value, and it might be worth 10 trillion. So 50% of the market cap of the company is based upon digital capital. Right now, 95 to 98% of the company is based on expectations. So you see what you've done is you're acquiring property with your cash flows instead of surrendering your capital. That's why I think that any company in the world should do it. You de-risk the stock and you double the asset value of the company, and you decrease the stress on the management team and on the employees. And that means you don't have to force your customers into 3-year enterprise agreements, bundle all your products in and sign them to a 3, 4, 5, 10-year lease. And if you look at big companies like Apple and Microsoft, increasingly and all the big software companies, they go to long-term enterprise agreements that look like rental contracts. And those rental contracts put stress on the customer. They put stress on the management team. Eventually what happens is the customers and the partners complain to the regulators, and they want you to be a regulated monopoly. So if you strip your assets from your balance sheet, you're on a road to serfdom. You're going to end up as a regulated utility company, like a power company or electricity company. That's why I say every company can benefit. Let me go to the next model. The next model isn't MicroStrategy. The next model is any company that has assets like real estate or art or energy that is not that interesting to the market, where it returns less than the S&P index and has less volatility. That's dead money. That's a zombie company. You either can't take it public, or if it's public, everybody loses interest. If you recapitalize that company with Bitcoin, you take 7 vol, 7 ARR art, and you add 60 vol, 60 ARR Bitcoin, and you do 1 for 1, you end up with 35 or 40 vol, 40 ARR digital art. Now you can take the company public. Now you are going to outperform the S&P. Now you can raise billions of dollars of capital. Now people will trade your options. And now you've actually got a very hot stock. So you can fix any zombie, or you can monetize art, real estate, or any other asset class by bolting on Bitcoin instead of gold plating something. Like if I wanted to monetize a lighter or a pen, I would gold plate it in the gold era. I would Bitcoin plate it. I put a crypto reactor behind my art company or behind my real estate company or behind my energy company. And now I outperform the S&P. Now, the third business model is the MicroStrategy model. We're a pure treasury company. So what we're doing is we're creating a Bitcoin reserve, and we're stripping the volatility and the risk to create fixed income, low risk, mid risk, high yield, and then a Bitcoin type performance, and then a 2x, and enabling a 3x, a 10x, a 20x on the options ladder. So we're a pure play. The answer to your question is most companies won't do that. I mean, Metaplanet might. There could be like a company like MicroStrategy in every market. There could be one in Japan. There could be one in the UK. There could be one in Brazil. There might be 2 or 3. So there will be some of them, but that's a special class of crypto treasury company. But these other companies, the zombie companies, juice their company. They're going to basically do 2 to 10x by putting Bitcoin on their balance sheet. And then all of the well-run traditional companies like Microsoft, they're going to 2x their market cap, and they're going to cut their risk in half. Those are the 3 business models. And I think that all of those are probably the most interesting thing going on in the world. Now, if you want, ask me the next question.
Okay, so I'm going to go through all 3 of the business models. In terms of the last business model, which is the MicroStrategy business model, you said there's going to be one, there's Metaplanet, and there may be one in every jurisdiction. Do you encourage there to be more than one in the United States, or would that be competitive? And the reason why I say would that be competitive, because on the one hand, the more companies that buy Bitcoin, the more treasury companies that spring up around the world, the better it is for the asset, and therefore the better it is for MicroStrategy. But you seem to say that there's going to be one in everything. So would you encourage a competitor picking up your exact playbook and executing on your exact playbook in your backyard?
I would. I do it with. I tell MetaPlanet to do it. But the truth is, nobody seems interested in doing that in the world, other than I think the closest is maybe MetaPlanet right now in Japan. As a practical matter, every company that's a public company has an existing business, and they don't want to jettison it, right? Yeah, for you to do exactly what MicroStrategy is doing, the Bitcoin treasury component needs to be 10x bigger than any other business you're running. So as a practical matter, I mean, the companies that are closest to us would be, say, Mara, but Mara's still got a really big Bitcoin mining and data center business, which is fine for them. I mean, and I think it's kind of a moot point, Ron. You're trying to create controversy for no reason. There's 50,000 public companies that can just recapitalize on Bitcoin and 2x to 10x their market cap. And still, like, I'm not going to tell Disney, sell the theme parks and be MicroStrategy, and they're not going to listen to me anyway. So it's a moot point. A company that if Berkshire Hathaway took $100 billion and created Bitcoin Hathaway tomorrow, and they bought all Bitcoin, then they could almost be like MicroStrategy. But who's going to trust Bitcoin Hathaway when they've been in the market for a month? Right. I mean, in order to get trust, you have to have hodled through the crypto winter. And you look at the Saylor tracker, and you can see that we bought Bitcoin in every quarter, like more than 40 times. And so we have credibility. We have $100 billion market cap. We have $40 billion of capital. I'm not terribly worried that a $1 billion company is going to catch us. And I'm not terribly worried that Google is going to put $200 billion into this, because even if Google bought $200 billion of Bitcoin, they would still have a $2 trillion company valued on the Google business and YouTube. You see, so I think we're wasting time trying to figure out how some company copies or beats MicroStrategy. Is it a problem? It's totally not. But like, figure out how to create a $100 billion business with 40 billion of Bitcoin with no other exposure. That's the other point, because you can't own anything else. If you own real estate or bonds or high tech or NVIDIA, all of that stuff is dilutive and distracting, and it undermines the volatility. The reason MicroStrategy works is it is pure Bitcoin 2x. And so you have to create, and by the way, it's pure Bitcoin 2x and trusted. You know, you have to have $100 billion of investors in the options market and $100 billion of investors in the equity market who have to trust you to not sell the Bitcoin and to keep buying Bitcoin. So we're kind of unique. I don't claim any brilliance. We literally backed into it and got lucky. But the truth is, I think Apple and Facebook and Google and Microsoft got lucky too. I mean, and NVIDIA, it's like they were doing something. They knew it would be good, but they didn't know it would be 100x better than they expected. It's like, they kind of, you do something and then the market 100x's and you just happen to be there, and then you're Google. Okay, so MicroStrategy kind of happened to be there when the market exploded, so good for us. But I think focusing upon us is the wrong point. Here's the point. You can create a Bitcoin treasury company in France, in China, in Russia, in Hong Kong, in Tokyo, in Brazil. You can probably create one or two more in the US. Have at it. I'm fine with it. I'm not really worried. We raised 13 billion last month. We're going to go very, very hard. If you can go that hard, Bitcoin would go to millions of coin. If you can't go that hard, you'll just be another one. And then there's a lot of room for, it's very constructive competition. The more important point is every Bitcoin miner should recapitalize to Bitcoin. That's the important point, right? The big idea is there's like 20 publicly traded miners when you raise $1 billion and you buy Bitcoin mining equipment, you're buying hardware which is depreciating 20% a year physically, where it's getting 20% a year less profitable because of the hash rate, where it's getting 20% a year less profitable because of the protocol, or 10%. So you're buying something that is minus 60% a year in productivity. You're investing in an asset which is losing 60% a year in productivity. When you buy Bitcoin, you're investing in an asset which is increasing 60% a year in productivity. So it's a very simple idea. Why would you burn 60% of your money every year, throwing it into a competitive hardware business where the protocol is taking you to zero, when you could increase your capital by 60% a year by simply buying the asset which the entire world wants? So that's what Mara is doing. That's what Hut 8 is going to do, right? That's what all the enlightened miners are doing. I think the fiat miners somehow think it's better to invest in data centers or invest in hardware. And by the way, you could say, well, we're going to switch to NVIDIA chips. The only difference between NVIDIA chips and Bitcoin mining chips is NVIDIA is depreciating 20% physically because it's burning out and obsolescing, and then another 20% depreciation because of competition. So instead of minus 60% a year, it's minus 40% a year. And so I think that if you're in the crypto ecosystem and you're a publicly traded company, you ought to recapitalize the Bitcoin. You should sell equity and you should sell debt to buy Bitcoin. You're going to make money. You'll rinse and repeat. You're going to go from a $5 billion or a $2 billion business to 10 billion, 20 billion, 40 billion, 80 billion, 160 billion. That is the Bitcoin way. The fiat way is you're going to invest in expensive electricity, expensive data centers, and depreciating NVIDIA chips or in depreciating in Bitmain chips. And that's basically taking you to zero, right? And that doesn't really make a lot of sense. Now, every other company in the world, every zombie company, every restaurant, every hotel, every travel company, every airline, every whatever, they've all got a US dollar capital structure. It's like you got a wood-burning stove in your house, and I'm telling you, put a crypto reactor and fuel it with Bitcoin, and you'll have unlimited clean energy forever. And the most useful thing we could do is get that word out and get people to wrap their head around the idea of a crypto reactor on your balance sheet where Bitcoin is the fuel. And if you do that, then your balance sheet becomes a wealth-creating asset. And for 50 years, on the fiat standard, when the dollar is 0, 0, 0 vol, 0 ARR against itself, for 50 years, the balance sheet was just a nuisance. It's like your appendix, or we don't know what it does, but it's like having your left arm tied behind your back. It's now possible to use your left arm and your right arm. You ever see someone try to lift a weight with their arms and not their legs? What I'm saying is use your legs, use your whole body to lift your weight. Don't just use your arms. Nothing could be simpler. All you have to do is think in Bitcoin, embrace the volatility. By the way, everybody runs from volatility. Volatility is fire. Are you the primitive Neanderthal that runs from fire? Because animals and wolves and sheep run from fire. Or are you an engineer? Are you going to embrace the fire, put it in an engine, and then put it in your plane, your train, your automobile, and your house and your factory? Because that's what Henry Ford did. We just need to embrace the volatility. Don't fear the volatility. Embrace the crypto reactor.
How did Microsoft respond? Apparently you presented them. Apparently you only had three minutes. First of all, is it true that you only really had 3 minutes to present to them?
That is a shareholder proposal driven by a very enlightened activist. They managed to get it on the shareholder ballot for the shareholder meeting. The meeting is December 10th. So the meeting hasn't even taken place yet, and the vote hasn't taken place yet. It turns out, per shareholder law, Microsoft needs to give the person that proposes the act, they need to give them 3 minutes to present it in the meeting. So the Microsoft legal team said, you have 3 minutes, give us a video, we'll play it during the meeting. and the activist approached me and said, would you like to make the presentation? So I spent 40 hours doing the modeling, creating the Microsoft model, building on Bitcoin 24. Then I did the analysis, then I created the presentation, and then I figured out how do you present it in 180 seconds or in 3 minutes, and I did it 21 times. And after 21 times, I said, it's not going to get much better than this. and I recorded it, and I said, well, I'm not just going to wait and have it played for 10 directors of Microsoft, because it'll be too late for the shareholders to act or vote on it. I'm just going to release it to the world so that millions of people see it. And I think, millions and millions of people have seen that video. It's gone viral. And hopefully the shareholders will look at it and they'll vote in favor of Bitcoin and send a message to the company. I don't have any illusions that, mega corp, is going to stop and completely change their direction based on a 3-minute video. But I think it sends a message to all the Magnificent Seven. Maybe Microsoft won't, but Meta will, right? Maybe Meta won't, but Apple will. Maybe NVIDIA will. Maybe Tesla will reevaluate and decide they could buy another $10 billion of Bitcoin. And maybe the other 50,000 publicly traded companies will, because my advice is the same for everybody. It's not any different. I mean, the strategy works for anybody that generates cash flow. And so it's right out there. And this is like the first shot across the bow. We're going to wage a campaign. At some point, I actually said, I offered to the Microsoft legal team, I said, hey, we'll withdraw the proposal if you let me meet with Satya Nadella for an hour anywhere in the world, and I'll go fly and I'll sit with him for an hour and I'll explain to him why it's worth $1 to $5 trillion to Microsoft with no risk. It's like, I would think, but I think he's a very smart guy. And I think that he gets technology. He was smart enough to invest billions in AI. And I think he really turned Microsoft around and got them in the cloud, and he was the brains behind Office 365. So he's very smart. I just think that maybe he hasn't focused on this, because when you're a smart person managing a mega corporation, everybody's pulling you a million different ways. But I have no doubt if I get an hour just to explain it, I'm like, well, you just do this and this and this, and you double your market cap, you cut your risk in half, and you make trillions, and you delight 600 million people, and you stave off the regulators, and Microsoft becomes the greatest company of the 21st century, and it, costs you nothing. It's like, it's like, why wouldn't you do it? I mean, the issue is just, there are a lot of brilliant ideas in the world that if people focused on them, and then they made it a priority, they would execute. But a lot of very intelligent, powerful, rich people, they just have other things that they're focused on, and they got 100 people whispering in their ear every day, and so they're just not paying attention. And we just got to get the world to pay attention.
Yeah, I hear you. Mike, just a question. You guys were very aggressive now, as we said. You raised 13 billion now recently. And I guess that 13 billion was part of the 42 billion, the 21 billion in equity and 21 billion in fixed income, right? Yes. Okay, so, so that's 13 billion of 42 billion down. How long is this plan supposed to last for? So in other words, the 42 billion raise, what's the time horizon on the raise?
Look, I don't have a crystal ball. You're asking me to predict the future. Okay, so when we announced this on October 30th, we didn't know that we would have a very enthusiastic embrace by the capital markets. We didn't know who was going to win the election. We didn't know what Jerome Powell was going to say a few weeks after the election. We didn't know that David Sachs was going to be the crypto czar. I mean, there's a lot of things we didn't know when we announced it. So That was a few weeks ago, and we laid out what I viewed was a conservative plan. My view is you should always underpromise and overdeliver. This probably won't come as a surprise, right? So you lay out a plan. I was reasonably confident that we would be able to do this in less than 3 years when we announced it October 30th. But I literally didn't know what would happen in the next 4 weeks. So the answer to the question is, we go as expeditiously as the capital markets will allow. And when the political winds blow in our favor, and when the capital markets winds blow in our favor, we put up the sail, we go fast. And if the wind turns against us, and by the way, there's a certain mood in the convertible bond market, and there's a certain mood in the Bitcoin market, and there's a certain mood in the equity market, and there's another mood in the preferred stock market, and there's another mood in the bond market, right? When people change, if Jerome Powell lowers the interest rates tomorrow, if he were to drop them 200 basis points, there would be a surge in demand for corporate bond and fixed income, you see? So if Jerome Powell were to say, hey, we decided to go faster, the wind starts blowing and billions of dollars flow. And if Jerome Powell were to say, I think we're going a bit too fast, we're going to need to study the data, it goes the other way. So the answer here is, we're an operating company. We operate. If you're investing in us, you're investing in me, Fong, Andrew, Sharish, and we're sitting every day, every day I'm looking at, what is the options market? What is the equity market? What is the debt market? What is the Bitcoin market? What is happening now? What's about to happen? And I can tell you the volatilities, the liquidities, the flows. And so if I have the ability to raise $2 billion in one day, I'll do it. If I have to do 200 million in a day, I'll do it. If I have to stop and wait, I'll do it. We decided to go to the bond market, and we'd sold maybe an $800 million bond, and we came to the market 2 weeks ago, and we started at 1.75 billion. So we doubled it. And then a few hours later, we took it to 2.5 billion. And a few hours later, we took it to 3 billion. Okay, so sometimes that's a 20-minute phone call. So the question is, how fast will we go? As fast as we can, right? Subject to market conditions. And of course, we're not going to do anything that isn't going to generate BTC yield, right? Our real acid test is it accretive or is it dilutive? And look, I could sell stock at $100 a share, but it would be dilutive. Or I could wait until the stock is $1,000 a share, but I wouldn't get that much capital. It would be accretive, but I wouldn't get that much volume. So we're always evaluating every capital market transaction versus BTC yield and the BTC spread. And that's really the strength of the company, because those numbers change every minute. And some days you can do $1 billion at a 70% spread and make $700 million. And would I? Of course I would. And some days, you go faster, and some days you go slower. And we live at the mercy, of the utterances of the gods and the demigods of the capital market. And there are people, believe it or not, a lot more powerful than me. And what they say, causes billions, tens, hundreds of billions, or trillions of dollars to move from the left to the right side of the screen.
Yeah. Mike, this headline that came out, Palantir MicroStrategy lead list of stocks that could join the Nasdaq 100. What's the path to get to the Nasdaq 100? Because as I understand it, if you do make the Nasdaq 100, effectively all the index funds and everyone would have to add MicroStrategy to basically have to be a representative of the index. I mean, is this something that you're looking at?
This is something that we have no control over. It's above my pay grade. It will either happen or it won't happen. I will find out the same time you find out if it happens. And if it does happen, it would be good for us.
Very good.
If
Very
it
good.
doesn't happen, we're going to do just fine, and I think we'll just wait and see, right?
All right. Lastly, before I let you go, so I want to talk about the risks. And Vinny Lingham brought up a risk. And I mean, there's various other risks that have been brought up. So he says Michael Saylor is now the second most powerful person in Bitcoin after Satoshi. He can single-handedly decide the fate of any future contentious issue with a simple, it's either my way or I dump it all. And he says decentralization, not so much anymore. And I do know of the principle that, in the Bitcoin ecosystem, it's the miners that have the power. You need the mining power. But there is like something in what he's saying, and not that I believe that you'd ever act against the best interest of Bitcoin, but fast forward to a MicroStrategy where Michael Saylor is not around and they're still continuing with the same strategy. Is this a real risk? Is this a real risk where if there's a fork in the road, a MicroStrategy board can decide, well, if this is the way Bitcoin's going to go, we're going to dump all our Bitcoin or something like that?
No, I think it's fairly uninformed take. It's a very uninformed. If Vinny thought about it a bit harder, if he understood Bitcoin better, he'd realize that what he's saying is ridiculous.
Okay, tell me why.
No. Who would be stupid enough? It's like if you owned a bunch of land in the U.S. and something, in the system happened that you disagreed with, you're going to rage quit the United States and dump all your land at a 95% discount? Not likely. No. I mean, the future of the Bitcoin protocol is determined by all the holders, all the miners, all the exchanges. Like it's a very, very diverse ecosystem, the Chinese, the Russians, the foreigners, the Americans, every possible business, every possible holder, even the regulators, they all have some say one way or the other. And the truth is, the reason Bitcoin works is because nobody wants to change it.
So I'll remind you,
the less you want to change. And if Vinny understood Bitcoin, he would be a Bitcoin maximalist and he would own 40 billion of it. But he doesn't. So why would someone that doesn't actually own the asset be an expert at all? Nobody that actually is a Bitcoin OG thinks that, right? By the way, how many proposals to change Bitcoin have I made in the 4 years? Name one.
Zero.
Right? So the point really is that's really a shitcoiner narrative. And it's a shitcoiner narrative by activist programmers that don't own any Bitcoin, that have no influence, that desperately wish that they could change the network. And they kind of go at it with this reverse double psychology, which is we want to change and corrupt the network, but the person that actually believes in it doesn't want to support our batshit crazy scheme, and therefore they're the threat. I just think
fair enough.
It's utterly ridiculous. It's like saying, Microsoft, might rage quit the enterprise software business and just all of a sudden shut down all their servers for every company in the world. I don't think so. You think Apple Computer is going to rage quit mobile phones and shut down every mobile phone in the world? I don't think so. I think it's their business. And to make the other obvious point, we're not even 2% of the market. I mean,
yeah, but you're arguing. You're not even 2%, but 2% is very, very big. First of all, and secondly, you guys are growing at a crazy rate. In fact, I mean, do you think that MicroStrategy's purchases were a factor in Bitcoin going up so much between the elections and 100,000? I mean, if I look at the price of Bitcoin at just after elections, that's here. It was 68,000. We're at 100,000 now, and that's also the period where you guys bought $13 billion worth of Bitcoin. So, how much of this do you think was the $13 billion that you guys, the $13 billion of buying pressure that you guys put in the market?
It's impossible to know. Right, because the market is set by, there's a huge number of sellers, right? Massive selling. So, when Germany is selling, if the US is selling, if there's obviously a huge number of sellers, they must be offshore, and I don't know where. And there's a huge amount of capital from the traders that are speculating in it. And the market is really set based upon the balance between the buyers and the sellers. I think what's clear is the Bitcoin miners and the mining subsidy or the 450 Bitcoin a day isn't really material to the price anymore, because MicroStrategy was buying 10x that. But I'll tell you the price. Sometimes I've watched. We bought 200 million an hour, and the price moves down. So there's someone dumping 200 million an hour. And by the way, we're never moving it up. So if we're actually in the market buying or selling, we're never selling. But if we're in the market, there's someone on the other side of the trade that is selling faster than we are buying oftentimes. So I think that we're an element. BlackRock is an element. But I think that the options markets are a massive element. Keep in mind, there's a $90 billion to $100 billion interest in MicroStrategy options. So I think there's arbitrageurs, there's options traders, there's a lot of hedge funds, there's a lot of deep equity funds. They're all playing, and then I think probably there's just a lot of people that maybe held Bitcoin for a long time. I think a lot of the big sellers, by the way, were the bankruptcy trust, people that seized FTX's assets or Celsius assets or BlockFi or whatever, or like the German government when they seized Bitcoin and they just dumped it. There's a lot of those non-economic actors, and more than you would think. And there could be a lot in China, right? Like if the Chinese government were to seize Bitcoin, they wouldn't be putting out a press release to tell you about it. But governments don't really think like Bitcoin investors. And so the market's going to go back and forth. I would say it's true that MicroStrategy is a positive force driving the price up. I mean, how could it not be, right? The more capital we raise, the more pressure there is to drive it up. But it's also true that Mara is, and it's also true that IBIT is, and it's also true that every other ETF and every other Bitcoin standard is, and now Similar Scientific and MetaPlanet and Rumble and who knows how many other Bitcoin miners they are. An equally powerful force, by the way, is just the sentiment of Bitcoin investors. If they actually start to believe that the asset is going to be around a long time, their time horizon stretches. If it stretches from 1 year to 10 years, selling pressure drops by a factor of 10. And so there's a lot of things like that at play.
And I mean, lastly, before I let you go, just someone said in the comments, and I think it's a real thing, but not really a real thing. Says, what if something happened to Michael Saylor? And I'm assuming that you have a board, and the board's bought into all these into the strategy, and the board will nominate a new leader or elect a new leader to lead the strategy. But is there a risk that one day MicroStrategy will just change its strategy? Because right now there's a CEO at the helm. He's pro Bitcoin. He's Michael Saylor. There is only one Michael Saylor. They call you the GOAT. They call you everything else in the chat. But what happens if something had to happen to Michael Saylor?
Well, let me make the point. I'm not the CEO.
Okay,
that's what you're missing.
You stepped down as the CEO. You stepped down as the CEO. I think.
I'm not the CEO.
Yeah,
I'm the chairman.
The chairman.
And so the simple answer to your question is no. There's not a risk. The reason that we're able to raise the capital is because we're a publicly traded company and the capital markets trust us. The reason they trust us is because we're a U.S.-based company. We have a board of directors pursuant to U.S. SEC rules. So we have good corporate governance. We have an officer team. We have a general counsel, a CFO, a CEO. All of them are not me. I'm the chairman. They're all fiduciaries. They actually have legal fiduciary obligations to the shareholders, to the company. We're subject to the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. We're subject to Sarbanes-Oxley. We're subject to Dodd-Frank, right? And the company at this point has, I think, a very straightforward, simple, laser-eyed strategy. And, Ron, the capital markets probably wouldn't be so sure in August of 2020 what was going to happen. And in August of 2021, not so sure. And August 22. But after a company has done the same thing 45 times and it's done the same thing every quarter, and after they haven't done the other thing, like what's the test? Bitcoin traded down 80%. We didn't sell any Bitcoin. Okay, what I could say is I as an actor in the company, I can't unilaterally drive things. I have to act with consensus of the board and with the general counsel and the CFO and the CEO. And if anything, the company the company just keeps getting more stable. If I were to disappear tomorrow, the strategy would just continue. There's nothing complicated about it. You wouldn't have a colorful figure wearing a Bitcoin t-shirt with quotable quotes on your podcast, but you would have a button-down Bitcoin treasury company that would keep raising capital, keep buying Bitcoin, because, I think it's pretty obvious to everybody that we have a franchise there. That's our strategic advantage, right? You would be destroying shareholder value to walk away from such a good business. It really is an insanely great business. And at this point, all of the officers and all the directors are behind that strategy. I think the capital markets, they can see that we're building that trust. And one thing that I even did this year, which I think builds trust, is I allowed my voting control to slip from the mid 50s into the 40s. And the message really is the company is being run for the benefit of, in partnership with, the common stock shareholders, right? The truth is, if you have one person that can single-handedly determine the course of the company, it's a bit more of a bumpy ride. And sometimes you need that in startup phase. But once the company has become mature, if people have invested $100 billion in MicroStrategy stock because they want us to buy Bitcoin and not sell Bitcoin, well, at that point, you don't really want the bumpy ride, right? You don't want the founder that says, I've decided to buy Disney Corp and I've decided to buy, like a billion acres of real estate. You don't want that. You actually want 100% Bitcoin strategy. And the way the company is structured right now, that's what it does. And I will point you to Microsoft and Apple and Amazon. And those are three companies that actually do things, but no one goes to sleep at night with anxiety that they're going to stop doing the thing they do, right? People still think Microsoft, Satya Nadella doesn't have 50% of the voting stock, but they think that Microsoft is a well-run company for the benefit of the shareholders that will kind of go forward like a juggernaut. And they think that about Apple. And Steve Jobs, by the way, didn't have 100% of, he didn't have 50% of the voting stock of Apple either. So MicroStrategy is a publicly traded company. The reason we can raise the capital is because we are constructed to build the trust, right, and discharge the trust of the capital markets. That means sometimes you go slower. That means sometimes you have to be much more articulate in your disclosures. If you read our 8Ks, we don't just tweet, MicroStrategy bought this and this was our yield. That would be what you do if you're a crypto entrepreneur. We actually attach it to an 8K. It's a 2-page or 3-page disclosure full of 1 page of financial tables and then 2 pages of legal disclosures and articulations explaining all the nuances. And that's required for you to actually make a statement. That's just a public company thing. So I think we're going to be doing the Bitcoin strategy with or without me. And everything we've done is to assure the shareholders that the company will be buying Bitcoin and holding it forever. And I do believe we have a strategy where it is reasonable for us simply to acquire more Bitcoin progressively forever and never sell the Bitcoin. And our value proposition is we're going to securitize the asset class. We're going to issue fixed income and equity securities that give investors the ability to get Bitcoin exposure with the volatility and the leverage they want, whether it's double or whether it's half. And that is a very sustainable business model. The world needs that. There's $500 trillion of investments in securities. And if one day 10% of that is in the crypto economy, someone's got to issue $50 trillion worth of Bitcoin-backed securities, right? I mean, someone's got to do that. That's a good business. We're going to be one of the players that do it. We won't be the only one. And no, you don't need me. I mean, you could put my podcast on rewind. In fact, I rather think that within the next 12 to 24 months, you know that guy, L.A. Dozier? He created all the Michael Saylor, all of my cool portraits. They're actually an AI model. They're not really me. They're an AI that made a portrait of me. I think they'll just create an AI model and they'll just feed everything I've said into the AI. And then you'll just interview AI Mike, and you don't need the real Mike. And probably the AI Mike will be better looking and more articulate and harder working and a bit smarter, and less grumpy and better informed than I am. And so really, we're only in this 4-year transition where real world Michael Saylor is important. I think we'll transition to artificially intelligent Michael Saylor. And if you want, an artificially intelligent Michael Saylor to beat up or bat around, you'll have more fun playing with him. And then MicroStrategy will just be a Bitcoin treasury company with a great set of real world executives, because probably the law will require flesh and blood people to be the officers of those corporations for a while to come.
I have to ask you something on a personal note. What you've done now is the biggest thing you've ever done. I mean, I've gone through your history. This is by far the biggest thing you've ever done, and certainly it's the biggest trajectory that you've ever done. Do you ever look at yourself and go, I can't believe what I've just pulled off? Do you ever think to yourself, do you ever look back and look down and just go I really can't believe that I pulled this off, or this is I can't believe that I managed to do this?
What I think is I'm grateful for Satoshi. I'm very thankful for Satoshi, because without Bitcoin, I think life is without a lot of hope, right? I've said Bitcoin is hope. I dedicated hope.com to Bitcoin. I think that when I was pretty disillusioned and depressed in 2020 when I discovered Bitcoin, and it actually gave me hope. Then I think, the crypto community and the capital markets gave me an opportunity that evolved into a mission, right? And the mission for the world became educate the world on how to recapitalize on Bitcoin, and then on the promise of the future crypto economy and digital assets, and that is expanding, and that's very exciting. And then the company got a mission, which is securitize Bitcoin and become a Bitcoin treasury company. And that's just an insanely great business, and I'm grateful for it. I would love to. Do I think I deserve it? No. I mean, I think that all the people that have great businesses, they kind of were hardworking, intelligent people, but then they got lucky. And so I classify myself as I'm the hardworking, intelligent guy walking through the forest and lightning struck and I saw fire. But I'm smart enough to realize that Prometheus gave me fire, or God struck the tree with lightning. I'm smart enough not to let the fire go out. And I take the fire around and I say to people, you can put this in the car or the plane or the train or your factory, and you can scare away the wild animals, and you can probably heat yourself and cook your food and not freeze to death. And I'm really excited. I got a mission. I feel like that. I don't feel like I deserve it. I feel like I'm fortunate enough to have found it. I'm very grateful, and I would like to share it with others.
Well, let me tell you, as someone that's been watching you from the sidelines all the way from the time that you said Bitcoin would never work, all the way back then, till the time that you actually accepted Bitcoin and then did what you did. I've watched you on the sidelines. I've watched you appear at conferences, podcasts. I've watched the evolution in your mind and what you've taken. I can tell you that I'm absolutely blown away. And I think like human to human, not Bitcoiner to Bitcoiner, but human to human, I think you should be super, super, super proud and impressed with what you've done. I think that you're one of the most important people in the world after like the Elon Musks and that in what you're doing. So just on a personal note, I think you should be really proud.
Thank you. That's very kind of you. One of the things that motivates me is the community. Like one thing when you walk around and you see people that are enthusiastic or grateful, they say you gave me hope or you gave me a way out or you showed me a light at the end of the tunnel. I think that that's what makes, all the difficult work or difficult days worthwhile. And one thing that I don't feel like I had so much before Bitcoin was the community. And I think afterwards, I really feel like I found a community and I enjoy it. And I think we're all on this mission together, right? And education and commercialization and adoption of new technology for the benefit of the human race. And I think that it kind of gets you excited to get up in the morning and go do things. So thank you.
I'm proud to be
working with you.
I'm proud to be on the mission with you, my friend. Thank you so much. Thank you for giving us this time. I know we went well over time, but thank you again. And thank you for every time that you give us time. Thank you so much, my friend.
Always.
Ooh,
the opportunity.
Thank you, sir.